is eating. When you see people, skipping lunch or not exercising, those kind of things, like, is that in my remit? Like, as a team leader, a godly leader, it should be in my remit to be encouraging all dynamics of team growth, right? So I think there's a challenge in there for us about how we lead our teams well in this area of the physical body, because it does directly relate to emotional intelligence. But what other tools outside of, that's a tool ultimately, right? Like eating well, exercising, these are tools in our tool bag to keep maturing with emotional intelligence. So what other tools, and Bjarte, what other tools have you found to be really helpful in developing and maturing in this area, and in your teams or yourself? Anything else for any leaders watching that you think would be helpful for them to think about?
I picked up several years ago someone that said that as he was kind of gathering his team, he said, my agenda is you. And he was looking at his team. So he didn't come there as a leader that had a very strong, he definitely, there was a vision and there was a drive in this team. There's a purpose for this team. But he was very much someone that would facilitate for his team, and recognizing the different strengths and the different needs in the team was a major part of what he would be focusing on. And I learned something from that, because I do think that that's it is being able to recognize the diversity in our team, and to love forth the different strengths that are there, and to embrace and strengthen the weaknesses, and be able to tackle some of that has been major. My first years in YWAM, just going around comparing myself with others and thinking I have to become something that I wasn't, and to kind of be more like this or be more like that. And I recognize that that's not reflecting who God created me to be at all. And so when I start to recognize that, being loved for who I am and with the strengths that I have, and with the safety to be able to process the weaknesses, and be able to create an environment where that is not just for me, but it's for my team, for the rest of it. It becomes very dynamic, and of course, some of the challenge I would sometimes find with YWAM is high turnover. So you think you work with a team, and then suddenly the whole team is gone. You have to start over again. But what a joy it is to and a privilege to work with people. It teaches you always a lot of things about yourself and others.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's creating an atmosphere where people, it's relational again, but where people belong. So you get to know people, you do things together outside of work. So again, it's that work-life balance. It's doing fun things together. It's getting to know their families, and it's celebrating. I think we see right throughout scripture that God gave the Israelites celebration as one of their practices. And I think celebrating small things and big things together is immensely important. Having fun together. And this is all about, it is all about the other. As we build relationships, as we get to know, as people feel they belong, that is a very emotionally intelligent thing, because at our heart, we're created to belong, we're created for relationship. So anything we can do within our communities, and I think we're blessed in YWAM, most of us, that we live in communities or near communities that we can belong to. And so we should be highly emotionally intelligent communities.
Should be.
I'm sure the Trinity is growing emotionally intelligent, so that's what we should be imaging.
Yeah.
But to me, it's about belonging. How, as you said, about allowing people to be authentic, allowing them to be themselves, knowing what their giftings are. How can they express who they are in their giftings? How does their gifting belong in my team? And then celebrating well together. Those were the top things that came to my mind when you asked that question.
Yeah, it's really good. And there's tons of stuff out there, right? Like there's lots of really practical tools, like for teams. I mean, I think this is one of YWAM's strengths is you don't meet a YWAMer that's not been in some kind of Myers-Briggs, DISC, Enneagram, something. It's like the number one talk topic around a new table of people. What letters are you? But those things are, we laugh about them, and yes, they have their weaknesses in those things, but they're incredible tools for really understanding who's in your team and how you interact with one another. And I know Ash he said something brilliant when he was talking about how it's about gaining the broader perspective and creating a space for dialogue, so that you don't assume everybody thinks and behaves the way that you do. And you learn to operate better, don't you?
You get a common language and a common understanding if you have done it all, like Myers-Briggs, because I train in that. So you have a common understanding of something, so it helps you understand the other person, but you can stop and think, oh, are they reacting like that because of this? It gives you that time and space to not react straight away, but to think, oh, they're doing something different to what I expect. And then you can come in with some curiosity, when you did this is what I'm sensing. Is this how you're reacting to it, or is this what you're thinking? And it can just help you often avoid some crucial conversations, because you're being curious and trying to understand the other person because of something you've noticed that you have a common understanding in. So
and maybe just the fact that these tools are helping us to identify that there's treasures in others, and if we can just have that attitude in our communities, if we can just be creating cultures around us as leaders that where we are listening to one another, where we are wanting to understand the processes that you're going through and the way you respond to things, and you're able to listen to the differences. I think if you have that attitude, I think that a lot of these things will come. You will learn. You will have a learning community, and of course the tests and all that is very helpful. But and it puts word to it. But the attitude, if we can create that and protect that, I think that's been very helpful for me, to start just to understand the richness of diversity, and that also the respect for other people's feelings, and that they don't have to react and respond the same way I do, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's so true. It was it's making me think of John Peachy's video, and he's talking about crucial conversations come from strong opinions. They're often high stakes are involved because people have very strong ideas and they're clashing with one another. But the key dynamics to all of this is listening, right? He talks about that, listening to one another, and listening. To truly listen, you have to have a right attitude in the first place, don't you? Like to be fully present in a conversation, you can't, if your attitude is not in the right place, it's thinking of the answer it's going to give before the person's even finished talking, and you haven't been fully present actually listening. And listening to yourself again. I think this listening dynamic is just absolutely crucial for developing a stronger emotional intelligence, both within team and ourselves. Yeah, it's good.
It's reminding me of one of the values we have in YWAM, and that we value the individual.
So true. And we value team. We operate in team.
And we do first then teach. So the understanding ourselves has to be in there if we want to understand others.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier, that I think often it's easy to talk about this dynamic around crucial conversations and kind of the dynamic of emotional intelligence if you both it works well when you both come to a conversation of a common understanding around this and trying to be self-aware and things like that. But it's very hard to navigate crucial conversations where perhaps the person that you're having it with is not very self-aware. And I think that often is where conversations come to a stint, like a what do you call it, like a block in the road. And again, it always reminds me, gosh, I need to first be able to see it in myself. I need to be able to recognize my weakness, my inability to see my blind spots, all of those things, because you become very aware of it in other people when you come head to head with an inability to see that. But I'm always trying to be like, okay, so where am I missing it? Because everybody has blind spots, right? So yeah, it's good.
I really
Go ahead, Keziah.
I really liked what you said earlier about vulnerability, because that's definitely in crucial conversations is being vulnerable with yourself about your own downfalls. Because I think in those kind of conversations where it's really heated, well, maybe, you can be so quick to be like, oh, but they're doing this, or they think this, and it's so easy to put it on them rather than kind of bringing it back to yourself of like, this is my understanding and my interpretation, my perspective, and they have a different perspective. And I think that kind of comes from a place of vulnerability and being able to face your kind of ugly parts in a way.
It's that it's the responsibility, isn't it? It's always I'm always, as a mum, I say this all the time. I'm always saying to my kids, but you are only responsible for yourself. Like no one can make you do anything. No one can make you like sit in a feeling forever and ever and ever. Like you are responsible for your own feelings and your like in terms of what you do with the feelings that rise, and you're responsible for your response when someone comes really unkindly to you. And so a lot of this in terms of our own growing is about self-responsibility, isn't it? And recognizing that we are responsible to look inside of ourselves, and we are responsible to be approachable, and we are, all of those dynamics. It's often a misunderstanding of where responsibility lies in reaction to one another. Good. Any other thoughts on that before I'm conscious that we have one more dynamic that we could talk about.
I had to go through a kind of a challenging process with a person in my life, and a quite close person to me, and some of the crucial conversation was we had to have was causing tension. It was hard to meet with the fact that now we're going to talk about hard things. So we decided to say that we're gonna have a coffee. That's what we want, what we're gonna do. And then the coffee made it to become a relaxing place to talk about the difficult things. But officially, kind of, we could say that we had a cup of coffee. And so it was relaxing. It was not. We didn't kind of feed our feelings towards talking together, because we so highly valued our relationship that was the most important thing. But at the same time, we had to deal with some very important issue. But we kind of wanted to use the coffee break as an opportunity to kind of soften it down a bit, and it did help very much.
The environment, the cultures that we create, I think it's like the soil for the plants, right? If we want growth in our communities, in our teams, we got to get the soil right, and so much of the soil is about the right ingredients, which is the kind of things. How do we create safe places, relaxed spaces that don't threaten and feed the insecurities and so good. It's a good point. Steve Mayers wrote a great article about endings and necessary endings, and necessary endings, I think, often do come out of a place of being self-aware. We have endings, like he says, in our life that we have no control over, you know, the endings of people dying, or a divorce, or maybe someone on a team is leaving, and, you know, that's their choice and we don't get to control that. But we also have endings, or endings to seasons, where we might really love what we do, but actually we've become aware that maybe we are getting in the way of a team continuing to grow, or young leaders behind us getting the chance to take on the leadership of a team, or maybe, you know, God's just shifting a heartbeat to a different area, that kind of thing. But he said something really interesting. He said that pruning is the process of proactive endings.
Good phrase.
And I thought it was a good phrase. Yeah, any thoughts on that? Any of you? Got any stories where you can think of that feeling of the Lord proactively pruning you? You're all stumped.
I think we have a natural aversion to it. Well, I do anyway. I think when things are going well, pruning just seems so, what's the word? It just seems the wrong thing to be doing. And we know that in our gardens, when something needs to be pruned, it's like, no, that's too drastic. It's never going to grow. And I think we have that in our life. And I love what Steve said about pruning leads to more fruitfulness. And I think we really need to be very aware of that. I know I'm in the stage of life where I'm looking at what do I do next? And I can already see great fruitfulness in where I'm going, but it's letting go of the current now in order to get where you're going. And I think Steve gave a really good example of that in his own life. When they spend more time with grandchildren, what do they have to let go of now in order to do that? And I really resonate with that. So it's helping ourselves and other people to see it's not necessarily saying no to this, it's what are we saying yes to. And I think often in YWAM, and I've been guilty of this myself, it's easy to say yes to something, but in order to do that, by saying yes, what am I saying no to? And we can be loath sometimes to give up things or to close things down when we should do, because we have a fear of failure, or we're fearing what other people might think. Well, why are you walking away from that? So I think understanding the season that we're in individually and for our team is really, really important.
Yeah.
And getting wise counsel on it, not just doing it yourself, but talking to those who know you well and getting wise counsel. This is what I'm sensing in myself, or this is what I'm sensing in our team. What do you think? Because often it takes several people to build up a picture, and wise counsel is always a good thing.
Yeah.
I actually think that's a huge part of being emotionally intelligent, is like inviting other people into your kind of own experience. I think that's something our family have done a lot over the years, and it's been such a blessing. And I think often we're kind of nervous to kind of invite people into a place of vulnerability, but it can lead to so much growth. And it's important to get other kind of perspectives on, especially with something like endings. I think that's a really significant thing that requires a lot of support.
And endings and new beginnings, right? Like the whole, like I was thinking about you even moving, stepping, when you become a young adult and you step away from your family for the first time and your parents, and it's an ending, and it's also having people close to launch you into your new beginning, right? And you start in a new place and a new phase of life. And it's such an important one, no matter what our age, whether you are 19 or you're 60 or anything, or we all need that so badly. I think it's community, isn't it, which is absolutely essential to our discipleship.
And actually, to go back to what Anne said about celebration and how important that is, even in something that feels like a death in a sense, but going into a new place and celebrating that newness that comes out of something really hard. You need people to do that.
Yeah, so true.
That's a very good point, Keziah, actually.
Yeah, it's really good.
And I wonder, you know, I see the young generation, there's a lot of expectations, and they're almost like they need to be the superhero of their own lives, like they and everyone should be, you know, super talented or super gifted or super something. And in a way it's recognizing that, you know, I was young joining YWAM, I said yes to everything. You know, it almost like I could do everything. And then suddenly you realize that that's not reality. You know, you come to a place where you realize that that's not possible. And so recognizing there's quite a bit of young people that are burned out and stressed, and that the weight of this whole thing of needing to be so much. Maybe this whole thing we're talking about here can help make a more healthy, you know, where we actually are able to embrace also some of those endings, and saying that it's not a threat, you know, that I don't hold the same role or the same position anymore that I had before. There's room for that, room for changes in my life. There's room for changes in your life. And I think that's could be a healthy thing, you know, instead of just holding on, you know, to things. And yeah,
so good. Oh, our time has run away. Look, it's almost hit the hour on the clock. So we're going to draw our conversation to a close. But it's been really rich, and I think this whole topic we could probably talk for hours on. I mean, it's something that hits no matter how long we've been leaders or how old we are. We can never, in my opinion, we can never stop growing in this area. It is a lifelong journey with the Trinity in his three persons to keep understanding who we are and who we do life with, who we're leading, who we're empowering, and growing the kingdom. It's so fundamental. And all the dynamics that we've talked about that help us in this area, from community to vulnerability, to celebration, and all the different parts that we've talked about. But I pray that if everyone who watches this, it spurs us all on to keep asking the why questions in our life and the why questions of our team, and to really spur each other forward in our journeys. So I just want to say thank you to all three of you. You all have such great perspectives, all really different from one another. And I love that. That's what makes conversation rich and dynamic. And so thank you so much for giving your time. And I think I can see a message from Rosa. I think people, there's a little hitch with our recording this afternoon. So when you're watching this, you might have jumped in and we were mid-conversation and you're wondering what on earth we were talking about. But this discussion was for our month on emotional intelligence, an essential ingredient to leadership. And it will be available on the Facebook page to watch and on our website as a future resource. And we've discussed this afternoon all around the articles and the videos that were posted as part of the month theme. So thank you for jumping and joining us. And we will see you next month for another one of these on our next topic, all about work-life balance. So thank you everyone for joining us. And that's it from us. Goodbye.